We each have really fond memories of Mario 64. The whole reason that we started talking, Andre, about Mario 64 together over Twitter was that we were both in agreement and alliance against a horde of people who were like saying Mario 64 sucks or like it's not a good game anymore or it's dated. And I remember just thinking that is absurd. I can't believe that anybody would rate this game any lower than, I don't know. How could you? I remember being appalled that like people, there's like a weird modern mindset, and some people call it like revisionist history or something like that. That like Mario 64 isn't a great game.
They don't know what the heck they're talking about. Like that is like, for me, I think that's like saying the Beatles overrated, right? Like this game or product or group that innovates and creates so much, to call that overrated, it's just something I'll never understand. And and to be fully fair, I obviously don't know their gaming history, but as one who grew up in the era with Mario 64, like I said, like as we talked about earlier, there was nothing like it at the time, and I still think it's a ton of fun to revisit. I mean, the 3D All-Stars collection just came out, what, a couple years ago, or a few years ago at this point, and I had a blast with it playing through all the way again.
Yep, playing it again. And new generations getting to discover it. I think that's what was so confusing to me. I'm like, Nintendo treats this title with lots of reverence.
Yeah.
How do people form this opinion that it's a terrible game? I don't get that. What do you think of that? Are people nuts?
I think they're nuts. Certifiably. Like, in a lot of ways, I think that Mario 64 set a trend for console generations to come, where every platform, every franchise wanted to make the leap from 2D to 3D. And even to this day, there are still franchises that were traditionally 2D that they're taking their foray into the 3D space. And it doesn't work with some franchises. But Mario did it so well, I think everybody, they saw the possibilities. They're like, I could do that too. Yeah. This should be what Castlevania does next. And I'm like, no, probably not.
It doesn't work for everybody.
It doesn't work for everybody,
It's a really interesting point, and just to build off it real quick, a game that came out shortly after Mario 64 was Crash Bandicoot, which is PlayStation's kind of like big 3D game. But if you look at how that game worked, it was basically fundamentally still a 2D type of gameplay. Yeah. And for as impressive as it was in its own right, it just was no Mario 64. And I don't think we saw any other game get close to it, aside from maybe Banjo-Kazooie, during that era.
What about Croc?
Sorry, you're right, my bad.
Respect for Croc.
We will not live in a two-dimensional world.
We won't go in one direction
or zig where we can zag.
We will walk through walls.
We will take a look around us.
We will not be confined.
We believe in the path of least limits.
We won't be told how to view the world.
We will experience true freedom.
We will not compromise. We will live the game through our hands.
We will be in control of something.
You cannot describe to someone who didn't grow up in that era what playing that game was like in that time, where it really felt like an endless possibilities. It was effectively the Breath of the Wild for its time, and I think more impressive given what came before, just because it felt so freeing going from the nature of 2D gameplay to a fully open world where you have dozens of moves at your disposal. It was just crazy what they pulled off, and it still blows my mind that it even worked at all, let alone as well as it did in 1996.
Yeah, I think that's one thing to really just pinpoint, is that 1996, if you go back to 1996, the other games that were still on store shelves and coming out were largely still 2D games.
Yeah.
I mean, you had 3D had started creeping into our lives with Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation, which hit first. And we had pseudo 3D platformers like Bug on the Sega Saturn. On the Sony PlayStation, we had games like Jumping Flash at this point. But Mario 64 comes out and it's like, wait, you can turn around. You can you don't have to go just on one straight path in 3D. Like this whole world, you could spin the camera around, and it just felt so much like a playground and a world that you could explore and live in. Brian, what do you remember about when this game first came out? What was your first experience?
My first experience was actually with you. Your dad had imported the game from Japan.
Yeah.
And I just remember it blowing my mind that summer. I couldn't think of anything else. I wanted it so bad, and I'd have to wait till Christmas to get one. So I'd spend time whenever my mom would take me to like Toys R Us or Walmart or whoever had a kiosk. I'd spend my time playing on there, and then getting it for Christmas was surreal. Like me and my brothers just fighting for game time on that thing. So
were you like the Nintendo 64 kid that Christmas?
I think it's pretty close. It's as close as you're going to get.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. Shouting at the top of your lungs.
Yeah, no, it was that was the anticipatory gift that year, and for years to come, like the 64 brought me a lot of joy, and Mario especially. I think that's the game that really moved the whole 3D genre forward. Like, you think if like Bubsy 3D had come first, and some other failed attempts, that maybe it wouldn't have gotten off the ground as soon as it did.
Nintendo 64. Look at that controller. Oh my goodness. So that's the Nintendo 64. Let me check this thing out. Oh my goodness. It really is. 4 control ports in the front. Memory card slot there. You got the power on this side. Reset on the right. And what's that in it? A cartridge for Super Mario 64. Yep, this is it. The Japanese machine. And we got it. Because we are the gaming kings, are we?
I remember personally, and those of you watching who are familiar with my retro life in the channel, like, you've probably seen the Super Mario 64 / Nintendo 64 video I released several years ago, showing all the home video footage that my dad recorded of us importing the Mario 64 and the Mario 64 game and Nintendo 64 months before its US release. This was the Japanese version. And for me as a kid, 10 years old, to be able to do that, I remember we drove all the way down to South Houston and we went to a store called Microplay, which was this really tiny shop, and it had anime stuff, but it also, they got a Nintendo 64 and they said, we're going to rent this guy out. And so we rented it, and the idea, I think we saw it in the newspaper that we could do this. And we were like, is this real? Yeah, we right now we could go and drive and get this thing. And like, we did it. And the whole day, the whole experience of doing that and then playing it, knowing I was playing it before all of my friends, before most of the people in the country, was very, very special. And it really left an impact on me. I'm so glad Dad recorded all that footage. I remember having a hard time figuring out what to do at first.
Yeah.
Then I realized I have to jump into this painting. Like that, I remember that being interesting because there was no, I was playing the Japanese version.
So you didn't know.
So I remember just like running around that overworld at the castle, Peach's castle. And then I think we like walked up to that painting and it wiggled. You know how it does that like little like shimmer? And like, oh, maybe I should jump into this because we didn't know.
Your brain's like, shh.
Yeah, I mean, we got a 64 controller here right now, and it's like, I remember kids holding this thing like this, and then going like this with their thumb to do it like this, and they're having such a hard time. They're trying to play, and they're moving, spread their thumb out like this, and I think it's because they felt like they had to have their hand on that D-pad because that's what they were used to.
Notice Tyler actually using the controller. See how he has to hold his hand there?
It's a wild controller because, it really felt like it was embracing the future, perhaps to a degree almost too far because a lot of people were confused about how to use it. Mm-hmm. But it had a lot of innovations. It had the control stick, which of course is instrumental in controlling Mario with a 360 degrees precision, plus the ability to walk or run, also had the Z button, the trigger underneath, which was useful for shooters especially. And then also, I think an understated I don't know if it's a revolution, but like innovation at least, are the C buttons. Mm-hmm. You have 4 buttons in a diamond pattern like on the SNES, but this time they're largely relegated to secondary detail, like controlling a camera. Because in Mario 64 you were effectively controlling 2 characters at once. You had Mario and then you had Lakitu, the cameraman, which is such a smart decision, by the way, to personify the camera. Like, that's genius to help people understand how that works. And I think the C buttons were just brilliant in how simple they are. It's like, press C right for this action. Mario, which always camera controls, are just great, but for other games that embraced it too, using the C buttons, it just you always knew where they were. C up, C down, C left, C right. So
yeah, so good.
Check this out. Whoa! What am I, a monkey? You could zoom in, zoom out, change angles. Go anywhere you want to go, do anything you want to do. Here we go! This place is really sweet.
And Andre, you said to me before we started recording that your dad knew someone who worked at Nintendo.
Yeah, so he ran an insurance company, and he knew one of his clients worked at Nintendo, and he was nice enough to give me a tour of Nintendo where he worked.
So cool.
A few months before the N64 came out, and it was actually there. They had a Cruis'n USA arcade in Mario Cafe. That was their internal employee cafe, and that's actually what sold my dad on the N64. But he's like, I'm not gonna get Andre any more video game systems. He has enough. He's got a Super Nintendo NES. That's plenty. But then he saw Cruis'n USA, which back then had giant Ultra 64 branding every time the game restarted, even though it would go on to be renamed N64.
That and Killer Instinct.
That's right.
They both had the Ultra 64 logo like floating around, and that's why we used to call it Ultra 64 before it was branded Nintendo 64. That's all we ever called it.
Yeah,
that's wild.
Yeah, so that's what sold my dad on the idea, even though we found out later that, of course, the internals of the arcade games had nothing to do with the N64 or Ultra 64. But with my dad now sold on what a 3D game could be, that client was nice enough to get us an early copy of it about a week early, because employees get early access to things. And he just gave it to me a week before the US release, N64, Mario 64, and that was the best week of my life. That was amazing. Just be able to go home, play this game that wasn't yet officially out in the United States, and just having a complete blast with something that I had never seen or experienced before.
Man, it's crazy to think that you and I were both actually playing it before it came out in the US, and so you were one of those kids. You were one of those kids that I was thinking, there's probably no other kids. It's just me. I'm the only one playing it. That's pretty cool. One of the things that really stood out to me and my dad, I remember when we were first playing it, and it's captured in the footage, is the first encounter with Bowser. Trying to figure out how to defeat him was a chore in itself. But it was so great that Nintendo, they kind of made you learn the mechanics of 3D through the way this game was designed. Because the boss encounter with Bowser, having to grab his tail in 3 dimensions and then use the analog stick to rotate it around and throw him into the spiked ball. I mean, you could tell that Nintendo, they knew they were creating something brand new for people and for gamers. And in order to be that leader, in order to be that one who ushered in a new era, they also had to kind of teach you and make you learn how to do it. And that was the perfect way to do it, was that boss fight. What do y'all remember in that boss fight? How did y'all feel when you first encountered Bowser?
Intimidated. Like, he's big and scary, and it's not an easy fight, as you were saying.
Yeah. Do you remember your first...
Yeah, I mean, kind of similar sentiment. He's just larger than you'd ever seen him, and it was brilliant how you had to throw him over there to the bombs, or and then they start elevating it when the next time the platforms tilt, or they add more to it. Each time you encounter him, there's another element that you have to deal with.
Yeah, the one boss fight with him where when he jumps back on, it hits the platform and it makes you slide down, and you could almost, die if you don't control it well.
And how far the camera zooms out when that's happening.
It's crazy. It zooms all the way out. I mean, what a showpiece for 3D. And honestly, I play this game to this day and I'm like, it still holds up.
It's still impressive. Yeah, it's still fun. Like, I still love going up the top of... I remember especially as a kid, but I still enjoy doing it now, going up to the top of the bomb battlefield and, looking where I came from. Like, that's a long ways. I came all that distance, and it's a little bit more quaint these days than it was as a kid, but it was incredibly impressive then.
Hurry up, Mario. You've got plenty more levels to play. And we'll catch you guys later when you actually watch the tape of this incredible game on the new Nintendo 64. Only available at the Esposito's house in Texas.
Well, guys, it's been really fun talking about Mario 64 again. Really wanted to talk about it here on the show and just reminisce and talk about our memories with this game and really kind of set the record straight. For any of you who are watching this and you're like, I hate this game, give it another chance. This is a game that all three of us here at the table here, we love it. And I think it's one of the greatest Mario games ever made. It's my favorite, actually. And I want to thank Andre for being here. Where can they find you, Andre?
Yeah, you can find me over at Game Explain on YouTube and TikTok. And we cover all kinds of things Nintendo over there. A lot of features, and especially now where I'm planning on doing a lot more kind of longer, more evergreen features. I'm sure I'll be exploring Mario 64 more at some point. So
Fantastic. Yeah, Game Explained been around for years, been watching you for years, so it's great to have you here. And of course, my old friend Brian, who you've seen on My Retro Life.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of my childhood footage on My Retro Life, so that's where you'll find me.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, guys. We'll catch you next time.